A while back, I did a video covering 5 Pokemon episodes that got banned, all from the first few seasons of the Pokemon anime series, or as it's been retroactively titled, Pokémon, the original series. However, that only comprises 274 episodes of this now over 1,000 episode long series. And for those wondering, as much as I love Pokemon, I haven't watched this series much, if at all, since I was around 11 or so. I watched a bit of Advance, got some scattered Diamond and Pearl episodes, and as far as movies go, if we aren't counting Detective Pikachu, I haven't seen any of the films since the Arceus one, or Arceus as they pronounced it there. It was weird. So that made this list especially fun, as in the making of this video, I got to actually watch some of these now banned episodes, or, you know, whatever remnants of them that there are. Now, of course, when I say banned, I use one of 2 criteria. It's either an episode that was made but never made to air at all in any region, or was an episode that did air in Japan but got banned in North America for some reason. Now, episode banning was prevalent during the original series, or somewhat prevalent anyways, but this has been much less prevalent with the newer series, which Nintendo themselves have had more direct involvement with. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at 5 more Pokemon episodes that got banned, this time from all the Pokemon seasons after the original series. Number 5. Starting off this list is an episode that, as far as anybody knows, was fully complete and ready to air, but never was. In fact, the footage being shown right now is from a teaser for this episode, and this is all that ever was released of it. This episode was known as Shaking Island Battle, Doja vs Namazune, and excuse me as I butcher those names. But this episode features Ash and his friends learning the location of the Falhone region gym, that being in Pseudopolis City. However, on their way there, they are stopped by a series of earthquakes caused by the Pokemon Whiscash. Thus, along with a new character named Choda, it's up to them to drive all the Whiscash from the area and stop the earthquakes caused by these Pokemon from ruining everyone's lives. Wow, another example of why real-life Pokemon would be terrifying. Anyways, this seems like a fairly standard Pokemon plot. I mean, it doesn't seem any worse than the one where giant tentacle destroy a city, so what happened? Well, this episode was originally set to air on the 4th of November 2004, but about a week beforehand, a devastating earthquake struck Nagata Prefecture in Japan. Due to this episode featuring the moves Earthquake and Fissure prominently, and due to it being set to air so soon after the real-life earthquake, those in charge of the anime series felt it would be in good taste to postpone this episode. However, postponement eventually went from being at some point within a few weeks to some undetermined date, and finally, the episode was quietly permanently removed from any and all listings. Due to never being in the Japanese rotation, it never made its way into any of the international dubs either. And perhaps oddest of all, due to this episode being pulled, Ash never learned the location of the Pseudopolis gym on screen. I wonder though, as far as anybody knows this episode was complete, is there perhaps a chance that this is still out there in some Pokemon Company warehouse somewhere? We'll likely never know. Number 4. So the next episode on our list is actually 2 episodes. It's a 2-part special known as Team Rocket vs Team Plasma, and was set to be one of the biggest Pokemon TV events ever. Or, you know, at least for the duration of the Black and White series, or as it was known in Japan, the Best Wishes series. Part 1, which would have been Black and White episode 23, would begin with Team Rocket's boss Giovanni arriving in the Unova region, where he would receive an item known as the Meteorite, which was a MacGuffin sought by the organization in the Unova region at some point during the anime series there. Also, for those only familiar with the games, unlike in the games where Team Rocket disbanded after events of Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, with the latter of those coming out all the way back in 2001, Team Rocket is still actually very much so alive and well in the anime. Anyways, Ash and friends are traveling with Professor Juniper and Officer Jenny to investigate a Pokemon attack that occurred in the last episode. Their helicopter gets shot down by a mysterious group of individuals who are also seeking the Meteorite. Officer Jenny, using her years of police training to realize that, oh, they're all in serious danger, has them rush back towards Castelia City, but an encounter along the way with an angry-looking Krokorok leaves Pikachu in critical condition. Back with Team Rocket, Giovanni successfully gets the Meteorite and heads to Castelia City, where they crash a masquerade ball being held by several of those in Unova region's social elite. Giovanni pulls out and unleashes the Meteorite, threatening to hold those at the ball ransom unless he is given full political control of the Unova region. In the process, a dangerous energy burst is unleashed from the odd relic, causing Pikachu to have a bit of an electrical meltdown. And that's where that part would have ended. Part 2, which would have been Black and White episode 24, continues with the mysterious group from before being revealed as none other than Pokemon Black and White baddies, Team Plasma, who attack the party being held ransom by Team Rocket and steal the Meteorite for themselves, hoping to use its powers to make Pokemon attack their trainers. As Giovanni and his personal goons retreat, he sends Team Rocket's Jesse and James to pursue Team Plasma, which is funny seeing how Jesse and James constantly prove themselves to be pretty terrible at this whole bad guy thing. So, Jesse, James, and Meowth pursue Team Plasma to the desert resort north of Castelia City, where a huge fight breaks out. During said fight, the Meteorite releases a large power surge that both greatly powers up the Pokemon of those involved, but also starts causing massive imbalances in the balance of nature itself. Ash and company arrive at the scene of the fight, where they hope to use the Meteorite to put Pikachu back to normal. They then discover that the fight in question has escalated to such a point where it could destroy the entire area they're in, including Castelia City. And then, because Pikachu is overpowered, Ash kicks both the evil teams to the curb and sends them running away with their tails between their legs, and the day is saved. The end. So, like with the previous episode on this list, these two are skipped due to an earthquake. Specifically, this is the massive 2011 earthquake that struck Japan's east coast in the following Fukushima nuclear disaster. Due to scenes similar to those tragic events appearing in these episodes, TV Tokyo pulled them from rotation, but stated that they had plans to air them at a later date, but never did. What makes these so interesting is that if they had aired, the Best Wishes storylines would have likely been radically different. Team Plasma here looks as they did in the original Black and White games, while when they later appeared, they appear more as they did in Black 2 and White 2, with their stated motives better matching those from those games. As these episodes were skipped, the Meteorite subplot never really had any equivalent either. Perhaps most interesting here is former Pokemon voice director Tom Whalen stated that versions of these episodes were sent abroad to be dubbed, though this ultimately wasn't done. I'm guessing that the plan to completely rework Team Plasma's role in the series was decided pretty soon after these were delayed in Japan, because as of 2019, they've never aired anywhere in the world. Number 3. So here's something neat, an episode that was banned and then unbanned. This was Pokemon X and Y episode 24, an undersea place to call home. This episode features Ash and friends going on a fishing trip. Ash needs to prepare to fight a rock-type gym leader, so naturally a water-type Pokemon could be effective here thanks to the wonderful thing known as Type Advantage. Suddenly, Ash gets attacked by Skrelp, a seahorse Pokemon, which then poisons Pikachu. Our protagonists are about to run to a Pokemon Center, but then they encounter some nice strangers in a big van, and being the good children that they are, they take the antidote said strangers offer to cure Pikachu. Luckily it works. The weird strangers from the big van then introduce themselves as undersea archaeologists, who are searching for the remnants of a ship called the Cussler, a luxury liner that up and pulled a Titanic after hitting an iceberg and sinking. Long story short, Team Rocket overhears them and tries to beat our protagonist to getting the priceless treasures from the sunken ship. Everyone nearly dies thanks to some huge whirlpools, and a Skrelp from earlier is re-encountered and peace is made, and everyone lives happily ever after, except for Ash, who, spoiler alert, didn't win the Pokemon League in the X and Y anime either. Originally set to air in April 2014, this episode was cancelled due to the sinking of the MV Seawolf, a passenger ferry accident that occurred shortly before its Japanese airing in South Korea, in which over 300 people died, most of whom were high school students. Due to being cancelled in Japan, this episode was also skipped in the English dub as well. But then, miraculously, it was somehow worked back into the series. It was aired in Japan on the 20th of November 2014 and finally in North America on the 7th of February 2015. Strangely enough, it also aired in South Korea in early August 2014, making it the only episode I can find that ever aired outside of Japan before it did inside of Japan. And also weirdly enough, when it was finally aired, it wasn't changed to fit into the series continuity at that point. Still though, it's neat to see a banned episode that finally did get a full release. Number 2. This next episode is actually 3 episodes. Wow, you came for a top 5 list and you ended up with 8 episodes. Aren't I kind? Anyways, with that said, I think these hardly count as episodes. These 3 episodes are known as the regular broadcasting clip shows, and were a set of 3 flashback clip shows shown during the Hoenn and Sinnoh anime arcs. The first was Pokemon Advanced Generation episode 120, Satoshi and Haruka, Heated Battles of Hoenn. The plot was simply, as Ash and company approached the site of the Grand Festival in Slateport City, home of the mother of all Pokemon contests, our group of protagonists take some time to reminisce on their adventure thus far. The second was episode 48 of the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl anime, Satoshi and Hikari, facing a new adventure. This clip show episode is pretty much just Ash and company on the way to Hearthome City, recalling their adventure thus far. Wow, a recap only 40 something episodes into the series. Then again, I remember what I saw of the Diamond and Pearl anime containing Sailor Moon levels of filler. The final one of these was Diamond and Pearl episode 120, The Mysterious Creatures, Pocket Monsters. This final episode in this trilogy of recap episodes involves the protagonists on their way to the 7th Sinnoh gym in Snowpoint City, where they recap their adventure up to that point, but also hint at some things to come. Now, these weren't the only recap episodes that had been done, with the earliest one actually dating back to the original series in the late 90s, and as was established in that first ever clip show recap episode, these episodes are never dubbed or released outside Japan. Clip show recap episodes, no matter what anime series it is, always come off as some form of quick, lazy, slapped together filler, and I'm sure that the Pokemon Company International realizes that too. Funnily enough, the Pokemon series in Japan still does a recap episode once per anime series or so, with the most recent being released in 2015 for the Pokemon X, Y, and Z anime. So that's neat, I guess. Number 1. Alright, so this is the big one. We've talked about earthquakes and sinking ships today, but remember the last vid I did on these where I got to talk about stuff like Japanese children having seizures and Ash nearly getting shot by an angry Texan? One episode I talked about then was a Christmas special involving the Pokemon Jinx, which many in the US noted looked quite a lot like a woman wearing blackface. And honestly, I do see why that concern was raised. Clearly those involved with the Pokemon series did as well, as following that controversy, Jinx's skin color, and every single piece of media related to the Pokemon series following that point was changed to a dark purple so as not to appear potentially racist. However, do you know what would have likely been worse than an episode merely featuring a Pokemon that looked like it was in blackface? How about an episode in which Ash wears what looks like blackface? And what if he did so to blend in with a group of monkey Pokemon as well? That sounds like an absolute recipe for controversy, so we should be glad that something like this would never happen, right? Right? Well, apparently not. The most recent banned Pokemon episode actually comes from the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime series. This was Sun and Moon episode 64, Ash and Passimian, Touchdown of Friendship. First released in Japan on the 1st of March 2018 and clocking in at episode 1003 of the anime as a whole, this episode has never seen a release outside of Japan, and there are no plans for it to be localized anytime soon. At least it's mostly a filler episode, I guess? Essentially, this episode involves Ash, who is attending a Pokemon school near Haioli City in the Alola region, having to deal with some bad Passimian that are going around. By the way, those are these angry looking monkey Pokemon. Then shenanigans ensue and whatnot, and at the end of the day, these Passimian are just your typical one episode anime throwaway antagonists who will likely never be seen again. At one point in the second half of the episode though, Ash paints his face black and dresses up as a Passimian to, I guess, get into the minds of his enemies or whatever? Sensing this could be problematic, Disney XD, who has been responsible for airing the Pokemon anime in North America since the start of the Sun and Moon series, announced weeks before release that this episode would be skipped in the airing of the series. It was also confirmed that the Pokemon Company International never had this episode dubbed. Crisis averted for now anyways. So with that, what Pokemon topics should I cover in the future? Perhaps a video on episodes that are currently banned in Japan? Let me know down in the comment section below, and while we're at it, definitely subscribe to Master Trainer for more great content like this. And with that, I'll see you next time.